This video is sponsored by Coursera. If you're subscribed to this channel, then there's a good chance you've either programmed at some point in your life or you're going to. Now this video is not going to be a tutorial, as there's plenty of those out there, but rather a quick run through of exactly what you can expect in an intro programming course and what you'd be able to do afterwards. So that should be the takeaway for the beginners out there. As I said, I teamed up with Coursera for this video, who's allowing me to go through their Python for Everyone specialization meant for complete beginners, which includes the basics of starting to code with Python, how to process and organize external files, how to access data from the internet, then manipulate it, how to create and manipulate databases, and much more, which we will go through very quickly. Before we begin, Coursera offers thousands of courses. Many I know people in this audience would find interesting, whether it be cryptography, data science, graph theory, or robotics, all the way to interviewing and resume writing and more. They team up with universities and industry leaders around the world, from Stanford and Princeton to Google and Intel, in order to make these courses. This is not just a platform I'm promoting, but also one I personally use, which I'll go through in future videos, so I highly recommend them. Links are in the description below, and with that said, let's get started. To begin, let's just go through the first graded assignment and start programming. Many of you know what's coming, but we're going to print hello world to the screen, and it's this easy. We write print hello world. We check the code, and we can see our output right here. So just like that, you've written your first program. Print is the command in Python that writes stuff to the screen, and if you forget just one little thing, let's say, it will not run. Now let's add some variables. By the way, the class provides a way to write and execute code just in your browser like you see here, but also explains how to download a text editor and write code just from your desktop. So again, we have print hello world, and I'll run it here, which I can just do from my terminal, and we see that it does in fact say hello world. So this does work in the browser and also our desktop. But now let's add a variable that we'll just call x, and we'll set it equal to 2. Yes, it's just that easy to initialize these. What we can then do is print the value of x and save it, and then if we run it here, which they'll explain how to do in the class, we just type Python 3 and then the name of our file, and we can see, look, we printed hello world followed by the value of x, which is 2. Notice if I had put parentheses around the x here like I did up here, then it would have printed the letter x rather than the number that's assigned to the variable. And Python also has math built into it, so we can set y equal to x plus 2, and then we can print the value of y. And here we can see again hello world and 2 are printed, but also the value of y was printed. And as a side note, you can name variables basically anything. We can replace every instance of x with the word bread. And we can replace all y's with the word cheese. And if we run the program, you'll see we get out the exact same thing. So yes, there are some things like print that are specific to Python, then there are variables or certain parameters that we get to name. Now, what if we want information from the outside world or from a user? Maybe you're making an app that needs the user to enter their age, and then it will do something accordingly. Well, to request information, we write input followed by what we want to ask them. And whatever they say will be assigned to some variable, which again can be anything. I'll call it blah to emphasize that name really doesn't matter. Then we can print hello followed by blah, whatever they typed in. Putting a comma here basically puts a space between the first word and the second, by the way. Notice that blah is not in parentheses, or else it would actually write hello blah. So we run it, and it asks for our name, so we type that in, and it says hello Zach. So there we go, we have a program where you can ask the user for something and then display something based on what they put. So already we can make something sort of useful. Let's clear all this, and we're going to make a program that can determine someone's weekly gross salary. We'll ask the person what their hourly wage is and also how many hours they work per week, which I just assigned to these randomly named variables. So when asked for their hourly wage, whatever they type in will be assigned to our pay variable, and then the same goes for the hours variable. Now when you use the input command and the user types in numbers, Python does not see them as numbers to begin, but rather as text kind of that cannot be multiplied or added, for example. To fix this, we just say float the two variables, and now Python knows they are just numbers. Next, the program has to calculate their total pay, which will just be that hourly wage they input times the hours they input. And then we'll print you make, whatever that total is, dollars per week. Then we'll run it here and see if you make 15 per hour and work 30 hours a week, then you make $450 per week. Making an app like this probably isn't going to make you $1 million, but we're already making stuff that's sort of useful, so it does happen that fast. Okay, moving forward, what if we now want the program to do something based on what the user input? Well, let's go to the graded assignment of week 5, where we'll build on the program we just ran. You can read the assignment here, but overall we need a program that again tells you your total weekly pay, but this time you get 1.5 times your normal pay for every hour you work past 40 hours. So if you work more than 40 hours, things are different and the program needs to account for that. So here's all you got to do. First, let's copy our code in. We're going to say if, which is something that's built in Python, the hours is less than or equal to 40, which has to be followed by a colon, then the total will be just as normal, the pay times the hours. Otherwise, which in Python you write as else, which just means if that first thing in the if statement is not satisfied, run this next part. Or in our case, if you work more than 40 hours, run this next part. Then the total you make is going to be those first 40 hours you work times your normal pay, plus 1.5 times your pay for every hour you worked past 40 hours. Okay, so the program's only going to run one of these. If it sees that hours is in fact less than 40, it's going to go into this, do this total, and then just jump all the way to this print part down here. Basically, these only run what's indented within them. And before we submit, I'll run this on the desktop, and we can see that if I make, let's say, 10 per hour and work 40 hours, I get the expected pay. But let's run it again, and we see that working that extra hour gets us not just $10 more, but 15 more total, which was that 1.5 times the original pay. The assignments ask for specific numbers, which we'll submit and see that it does in fact work. And the last thing I want to go over when it comes to the basics is loops. Something that computers are great at, but we are not. Imagine we want to type the numbers 1 through 100. Well, that would kind of suck to do manually. Instead, let's write a loop that will do it for us. We're going to make a variable that we'll call I, and then set it equal to 1. Then the new command we need to implement is while, something built into Python. And we'll run this for I is less than or equal to 100. As in whatever we put in here is going to run so long as I is less than or equal to 100, which it is to begin. We'll then print whatever I is. And then we'll add 1 to I. This may look weird mathematically, by the way, but in programming this basically means set the new value of I equal to the old value plus 1. Okay, so our program will set I to 1, see that it is in fact less than or equal to 100, so we'll enter this loop. It's going to print the number 1, then increase the value of I to 2. Then we reach the end, but since I is still less than or equal to 100, it's going to run the loop again. It will now print the value of 2, the current value of I, add 1 to it, and it will continue this up till I equals 100. We can run it and see that in fact the integers are all printed to the screen. Now if you accidentally said something like, while I is greater than 0, let's say, well, this is always true and it's just going to keep adding 1 to I every time. So if we ran this, what we'd have is actually an infinite loop. And with this, you can see how fast your computer actually can print out numbers. It will keep running, by the way, until you stop it. And after just a few seconds, we can see that it's already printed almost 2 million numbers. Now, those are some of the main topics you'd learn in any introductory programming course. But now let's get to some more of the advanced stuff. Let's say you're at your job and your boss asks you to go through this long text document and he says he wants you to find every instance of anyone with a specific email address, like anyone with an @uct.ac.za extension. Maybe they need the amount of times this email comes up, or maybe they want all the lines that include this printed in one document, but everything else ignored. This is a document provided by the class that you'll play around with in the course, by the way. So what would you do here? Well, first quit that job because that sounds extremely boring. But you realize you got to eat next week, so you decide to just do it. Should you maybe just do a Control F to locate all these emails? No, because that's not fancy enough. So let's write some Python. First, we got to save the text file to the folder where all our Python code is located. Now our first line of code is going to be random variable name equals open and then the file name. I'll let the instructor briefly explain what that is.
And so before we can work with a file inside Python, we want to tell Python that we're going to work with that file. This is an act we call opening. It's not actually reading the file, it's just making the file available to the code that we're going to write.
So we just need this open command to get started, and we're going to use our variable here to manipulate the file. Now Python is smart with these files. It sees them as a sequence of lines, and we can make a loop that goes through all of them and then does something accordingly. Remember that while indicates a loop. Well, another type of loop is a for loop. And we're going to write for some random variable in text, the variable from above. Then we're going to print our tacos variable. So what is this? Well, tacos, or whatever variable you put here, is going to represent essentially each line within our text file. Our program is now going to loop through every line within our text file and then print the entire line. We run it and see the entire document. But this is not what we wanted. We just want instances of that one email address. All we have to write is if that email address is in our variable, then print that line. Now we see only lines containing that email extension were printed. If we want the amount of these lines, we make a count variable that starts at 0. Then as the program is looping, if it finds that string of characters, it will not only print the line, but add 1 to the current count. Then at the end of it all, we'll print that count. We run it and see those same lines of text, but also the count here at the end, telling us there are 25 instances of that email extension. By the way, I've heard stories of people getting raises for things like this. They'll just automate some process at their office using programming that will save the company time and money, and it's not even something that was asked of them. So realize you don't need to be an expert programmer to get value out of programming. You can learn just a little and then do a lot with it. Okay, going back now, you'd also learn commands that allow you to manipulate these strings. I could just add a .upper to the thing I'm printing and I get everything capitalized. If I want to see if a line starts with some word, I'll just write if my line variable .starts with and then put the word I'm curious about inside. Now this will only print the line if it starts with from. We run it and we get all the lines that start with from and still everything's capitalized. Now real quick, in Python there are things called lists that are kind of like a collection of variables. I can pick a variable name and instead of setting it equal to a number or word, it will be comma separated values. If I print stuff bracket 0, it will print this first value here. Yes, these do start at 0. If I print stuff 1, it will print the second entry. And if I just print stuff, then it will show the entire list. Then we run it, and as you can see here, we have the first entry, the second, and the whole thing. Okay, so let's bring back that old code. Remember how this printed all the lines that started with from? Well, these all look the same. So what if I just wanted the email addresses that were printed? Maybe a marketing company wants to store these in a database, for example. Well, for each line that starts with from, we're going to take that line and split it, then assign that to a randomly named variable. And I'm just going to print this to show what we did. What you'll see here is that we now made a list, a collection of values where each one is one of the strings in each line. Our code took each line we had and then split them around the spaces and created a list. Notice that the email addresses are the second entry in all of these right after the from. So what we can do is print the second entry of each one. Now we run this and we finally have all the email addresses that we need. And now that you know all of this, we can use the same techniques basically on information from the internet. Real quick, if you guys pull up any website and go to a link, you can right-click that and inspect it to bring up the HTML code that produced what you're seeing. For any link, you'll see an href followed by the URL of where that link is going to. And now what our goal is to extract and print all the URLs that this page is linking to, kind of similar to what we did with the emails. And it really doesn't take that much more work. I'm going to do it for this page you're seeing here as there's only 3 links, so it'll be easier to see. Now honestly, a lot of this code will look complicated, but don't worry. It's just needed to connect to and retrieve information from the internet. Like first we need to import some things that I'm not even going to explain. This is just something you copy and paste in order to get URL info. Then we're going to use a more complicated open command followed by the URL. Again, this looks scary, but it's nothing to worry about. We're just opening the HTML. And I can delete this. We'll keep the same loop, and first let's just print everything. The only new addition we need here is a decode add-on, and that's kind of due to the format of the URL information. We need everything as a character string, which this accomplishes. We run this, and now we can see the HTML of the page, and here are some of the pages it's linking to with that href we saw earlier. So let's complete what we want and say if href is in our line after being decoded, then do this next part. We'll make another list in which we take our decoded line that would have href in it and split it. Remember how the split function separates a string around spaces? Well, the href is around parentheses now. So we're going to split each line containing href around parentheses instead of a space, which we can do just by throwing that inside the split function. The URL itself will be the second value in this list. So we'll just print that and the program's done. We run it and see that we almost got everything, but why is there only 2? This is a huge part of coding, by the way, figuring out what's wrong with your code, assuming it's even executing without getting errors. We'll look back at when we printed the entire page and see, wait, one of these hrefs is in all caps for some reason. We said if lowercase href is there, which is different when it comes to Python. Well, remember how we printed an entire page in all uppercase letters before? Now we're going to use the lower function for lowercase. This now says if href is in the line after being decoded and everything is lowercase, then split that line and print it. We run this and see, hey, we got that third link. So we can now see what URLs some page is linking to. And if we ran some kind of loop, we could take those URLs, plug them into the same function, and see what those pages are linking to. If we did this over and over, you'd have this huge list of what pages link to others. And this is essentially the backbone to what Google does to rank and index websites across the globe. We have kind of started to make a really simple version of a web crawler. How websites link to each other is a big factor in how things rank when you do a Google search. Then if you wanted, you could save all the information of interest in a database to organize it, which is what the second to last part of this course is on. I'm not really going to cover it, but you learn how to manipulate, index, and organize databases. And a database could be used for organizing songs, artists, genre, etc. It could be emails, passwords, usernames, and so on. Now when it comes to an introductory programming course in college, let's say, you're probably not going to learn all of this in one semester. At least I didn't in my first programming course. Even on Coursera, this was really broken down into 5 courses which make up a series for their Intro to Python specialization. Of course, I did not cover everything you'd see in an intro course, but hopefully you have an idea of what you would be able to do after just a few weeks or months of learning to code, and you have an idea if this interests you at all. I personally did enjoy this course, and they do have resources like a free textbook, built-in quizzes and graded assignments, plus a forum where students can interact, ask questions, and so on, which is why I personally use the site currently for taking certain classes. And that's where I'm going to end this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and join the Major Prep Facebook group for updates on everything, and I'll see you all in the next video.